Ready to experience the power of releasing what no longer serves you and awaken to a more beautiful, intentional way of life? You, my friend, are in the perfect place. Welcome to Above and Beyond Style. I'm your host, Maria DiLorenzo, and in 2019, I founded my brand to provide a unique, intuitive approach to personal styling and home editing for those ready to get clearer and experience personal freedom. With this podcast, I'll uncover key elements of where spirituality, psychology, and style intersect, revealing how you can make intentional choices to liberate yourself from clutter and live a clearer, lighter, joyful, authentic life. So let me ask you, are you ready to clear your closet and your living spaces to find your freedom? Then it's time. Come with me on this journey, and together we'll take your style above and beyond style. Hey friends, welcome back to Above and Beyond Style. Happy to be back with you this week and looking forward to digging into yet another topic around nomadic life lessons from the last 2+ years or so. Now, this week's topic is something that I have wanted to talk about at length in previous episodes, but just have been trying to navigate and figure out the way and how I want to talk about this piece, because it does feel important, and it's one that I, interestingly enough, get a fair number of questions about, but it also feels a little taboo. So this week we're going to talk about money. And this is a topic that I recognize may not always be the most comfortable for people, myself included, because, having grown up in the United States, I do feel like there is a bit of this culture around, we don't really talk about money. We don't like to talk about our income or the specifics around the amount of money that we make, or how much we have in retirement, or it feels like specifics around money gets, I don't know what it is, to be candid. I don't know if that's like a cultural norm that because we're a capitalistic society and so much of our economy is built on the concept of buying and selling, that I don't know if that's kind of just ingrained in the nature of the conversation. But when I was thinking about these last couple years, and I sometimes will get this question about, and I actually believe it comes from a really good place of genuine curiosity of how are you doing this? And in some ways I think it leads to conversations about stamina or the importance of commitment and staying with a goal or a decision. But I do feel like inherent in this conversation also has to do with how I've been resourced and how I've been able to sustain this type of transitional living for an extended period of time. So I thought I would dig into a little bit of the details. And I don't believe that I'm sharing information in a way that is to brag or be boastful. It's to come from a place of clarity within myself that it has taken me a few years to get to a place where I could talk about it in this way that did not feel shameful or embarrassing, or I don't know, some whether there's a negative emotion tied to this on some level. I didn't want to speak from that place. I wanted to make sure I was speaking from a place of confidence and clarity and a place of genuinely wanting people to understand this is how I've been able to do it. And it's not to suggest that it's the only way, but it's maybe helps paint the picture for how and why I've been able to make some of these more non-traditional, perhaps fairly risky behaviors or tactics to be able to kind of live this way. So let's dig in a little bit. I do think it's important to recognize the longevity of this conversation. And it's not just about the role of money in the last 2 years. It's really been the role of money since I perhaps was able to earn my own income. So out of graduate school, working full time, and then going into my professional career. And I'm grateful because I feel like I learned very early that there was an important message in my own family around saving for important things. And retirement was one of those things that I feel like, I don't know if this is just like in my house, but my dad was an academic. He taught at the collegiate level the majority of his professional life. And he often would talk about and tease about the days when he would be able to retire. I think from that particular generation, there was this like beautiful carrot at the end of the end of the tunnel, kind of the light at the end of the tunnel that retirement held. And it was a conversation that I think he and my mom, I'm grateful that they were aggressive savers and they did what they could to invest their money wisely in a way that so when my dad did retire, they could live very comfortably in their existing lifestyle. And even now, as my dad has passed, my mom continues to be able to live a very comfortable lifestyle from those investments. And that was sort of my model for understanding about retirement. And especially because I too worked in education for about the first 15 years of my career, there was always that opportunity for working with in an employer-sponsored benefits and having the option to contribute to a retirement plan. So that was not an unfamiliar thing for me. And from a very young age, so 23-ish, 24, when I first started working, I would put away money and start to save money into these retirement accounts. And by the time I finished my career in higher education, when I was making the most money that I made in that field, and to date, it's actually the most money that I've made in my career, I was saving aggressively. So a good 10% of my take-home pay was going directly into retirement. So for those years, I really was able to collect a really nice pocket of money. And I think that money, while I have not touched it, it's still sitting in retirement and earning and doing all the things it's supposed to do. It's been a safeguard for me as I have been able to walk into different opportunities and recognize, while I'm not drawing from that money, I don't necessarily want to pay the penalties and do that thing, but there is a comfort and a peace in knowing that I have spent years of my life contributing to retirement. And while I have been self-employed and working toward growing my own business, I've taken a step back in being able to contribute more aggressively to my savings and for my retirement. And I've been able to come to a really peaceful place about that, because I recognize in these years while I've been building my business, I've needed the funds to be able to maintain my life and do the things I've wanted to do. So that's kind of one piece of the puzzle around my thinking around money and how I've been able to, actively save and be conscious of my saving. The other piece of information that I think is important is I'm in my mid-40s, and at this stage of my life, I have owned 2 homes and sold 2 homes. So real estate, while it was not something that I necessarily went into my life thinking, oh, I'm going to profit and make money off of real estate, it actually was a very prime factor for how I've been able to maneuver and somewhat up level in my own financial picture. And the real estate investments for me really paid off. I happened to buy my very first home in 2008 during the Great Recession and was able to get a first-time home buyer loan from the government to help contribute to a down payment for my home. And it enabled me to buy a place that I would never likely have been able to do that on my own in other circumstances. And the really amazing part of that particular purchase was that I stayed there just under 10 years. I think I lived there 9 years. And by the time I was ready to sell that home, I was able to basically make like double the profit of what I spent on the home. And so the return for that investment was tremendous. And obviously, that's what most people are looking to do when they invest in real estate. You love to buy low and sell high. And for me, it was the thing that enabled me then to buy my second home, which was, I would say, an up-leveled home. It was a more expensive home in a more financially affluent part of Boston. And so it was more attractive. And so I also knew that my property value would increase over the time that I was there. So that purchase allowed me to then move into this new home that had greater value. And so when I sold that home in 2023 and started this nomadic experience, I also made another return on that investment. I made a significant profit from that home. And that profit has been what I like to call my scaffolding for this experience. And when I walked into this, I'm going to sell my house, I'm going to have this nomadic experience where I'm going to try to find a more vibrant lifestyle and live from a place of more community and connection and vibrancy in basically all areas of my life. It was easier for me to be able to take that risk, knowing that I had this pocket of money that was going to allow me to take some additional risks. So the profit from that home was always intended to be reinvested in a new home. That was the goal, right? That was the great, I have this profit. I will be able to reinvest it into a new down payment. I might pay off some existing debt, those types of things. And initially, when, if you talked to me in April of 2023, I thought, great, I will utilize this money for a couple different purposes. One was to spend more extended time in Europe, which I did, to travel, to do some of those more adventurous pieces of this puzzle that I really wanted to do, but obviously needed the financial resources to be able to do that, which also meant that I was working less. So while I was focusing on where I was going to live and the kind of travel experiences I wanted to have, I was consciously making some choices about my business. Again, mind you, these are in the early years of my business as I'm developing and growing this. I made a very conscious choice to scale back in a way in my business, so I was not working in the same way perhaps that some people might have cautioned me against in those early years, because I was making different decisions toward this nomadic experience. So this money became, as I said, my scaffolding to support this experience. And while I was in this process of understanding that this was not going to be a short-term commitment of time, I actually was taking more time to evolve and develop and understand where I wanted to live and the experiences I wanted to have. And so this money then became, like I said, not necessarily for a reinvestment of a home, because I didn't see that on the close horizon. I still don't see that yet when that's happening. But this money became the resource that I needed to be able to sustain living in these kind of non-traditional ways. And perhaps to no surprise to anyone, that renting or living in Airbnbs or things of that nature were more expensive than my mortgage was in a very expensive town in Massachusetts. So the irony is, most people think, oh, isn't it so great that you're saving all this money? Well, the truth of the matter is, for my living expenses, I wasn't necessarily saving all this money, because I was having to reinvest it then in these sort of short-term rentals, which were pretty pricey, I would say. And especially because I was also deciding to travel and to do some of these things. So I was making some very conscious choices about how I was using this money and what it was enabling me to do. And at first, I think I felt very cautious in talking about this with people because it felt like, gosh, well, isn't this a place of privilege? Like, who am I to tell people to go out and take these risks and do all these adventurous, non-traditional things if they perhaps don't have the financial resources that I have to be able to do this? And it was interesting because I feel like for years I felt reticent to talk about it with anyone. And I didn't really want to allude to the fact that I had taken these kind of active steps back in my business. And that also then simultaneously meant I was more reliant on this pocket of money. So when people then asked me, like, how are you doing this? I didn't want to mislead them in a way that made them feel like, oh gosh, I've just, I'm just living in the money right here. It's just like at my fingertips, I can do anything I want. No, that wasn't necessarily the case, but I did have financial reserves to be able to enable me to do things. And one of the most important parts of this that felt like the reason why I wanted to share this with you about how money got redefined for me, the way that conceptually I think for a long time felt really guilty about using this money that was ideally to go directly into a new home, to be reinvested in a new home. And I wasn't intending to use all of it, but it was a big portion of it. I was hoping then, I even had a dream, I remember at the beginning of all this, that I could just buy a home outright. Like, it wouldn't be this extraordinary, enormous home, but I might be able to like build a tiny home or have my own little cottage in some place and just be able to pay cash for it. And that was like the ultimate idea of like, can you imagine what it would feel like to not have a mortgage and not have that type of, overhead that I would have to pay to live? Like, the dream of that was very much possible for me at the beginning of all this. And while that was interesting and I was certainly motivated to play around with that idea, I think the larger lesson that came from it, and the reason again why I want to talk to you about this, is I had to learn to redefine the use of money and the concept of money. And I don't know how you were raised or the type of constructs that you have about money, but it always felt like it was a resource that was finite, that there was like a shortage of it, and I would only have access to a certain amount of it for my whole life. And once it was gone, it was gone. And there was a little bit of like fear and scarcity and a sense of like, I don't know if it'll ever come back or how it'll come back. And so I, for a very long time, was in this like very strange place about money and how money would come into my life, and feeling in some ways a little bit anxious about holding on to it. I can remember, again, when I was making the most I ever made in my career and feeling the joy of that expansive freedom of having more resources available, but also simultaneously having that little like worry about what happens when and if this goes away. And that's such a strange dynamic to be living in. I don't know if that resonates for you, but money for me was always sort of in this like, sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. So you don't really know. It feels unpredictable. And there are all sorts of ideas and concepts wrapped around when you have it, when you don't, how you feel secure when you do, how you don't feel secure if you don't. And I recognize, again, I am speaking from a significant place of privilege about this. I have never had to worry about my fundamental resources around food, safety, shelter, clothing, all of that. So I don't want to come at this from a place of like, I'm ignoring the baseline needs and recognizing that there are many people in our world that don't have that. So how lucky am I that I even get to talk to you about it from this perspective? So I don't want to lose sight of that, but I also want to not be shy about the fact that money and the construct of money had to get redefined for me. And if you can think about the infinity sign, so it's like the number 8 on its side, I was introduced to this concept a few years ago, and it really helped me reframe and re-understand how to approach money. And the beautiful thing about this infinity sign, if you can imagine, and kind of trace your finger along the shape of the infinity sign, that there is a motion of going in and going out. And it's a beautiful kind of flow of recognizing sort of that if you're just tracing the line of the infinity sign, this was the construct that I came to learn about money. That there would be times in life where money would flow in, and there would also be times when money would flow out, and then it would come back in and go back out. And its ultimate purpose was to be recycled. That any extreme, whether you're hoarding it and never spending a dollar or you're blowing every single dollar you own, there's a balance that has to exist within the construct of money. And the less attached I got to the concept of holding on too tightly or getting anxious about it when it got low, the more easily I could adapt into this kind of flow about money coming in and money going out, and trusting that when I was a good steward of the resources that I have, I could trust that it's going to the things I need. It's going out to support other people, resources, things that matter to me, because your dollars have power. And that ultimately that would then come back to me in some way, shape, or form. Did I have control over when that happened, how that happened, at what rate it happened? Would it come back to me in the equal measure? No, I didn't have any control over any of that. And I still don't, and none of us do. But the understanding of how that money was then kind of reconceptualized for me helped me become less attached to how money then supported my life, and ultimately allowed me to see this money, this resource of the profit from my home, not exclusively as a new down payment for my next home, because I still don't know when that's going to happen, but to appreciate and recognize and redefine it again as the scaffolding for, this is allowing me to live my life right now. This is allowing me to build my business more slowly, more intentionally. I'm able to make some changes along the way and sort of edit and iterate along the way so that my life can look more connected to how I'm ultimately wanting it to look. And again, that money has provided me that quote unquote stability to be able to do some of that. And you've heard me talk in previous episodes that safety and security is not an outside game, it's an inside game. And the concept of trusting and knowing that ultimately I am safe, I am secure, and I am supported does not come from a balance in my bank account. It has to come from an internal place of trusting and knowing that I am okay, that I am safe, and I will have everything I need when I need it. Because I can't point to one single time in my life where that has not been true for me. So there is no evidence to support the contrary. And I think that's helped me quiet some of those stories and anxieties and beliefs around, oh no, what if I use and reduce this balance to this amount of money that's supposed to be reinvested in my home, I'm not going to have as much to reinvest and I won't be able to get a home that I really want. And you can hear the story of how in that, by holding so tightly to this construct about money and where I'm safe and how I'm supported, I am now limiting the way that this might play out. And the looser I've gotten, and I mean that in the best way, like the looser I've gotten in recognizing that this money has supported me, it continues to support me when I need it, and I'm still retaining money in this balance. I'm not spending it to zero. So this whole idea around how to redefine and understand money in the context of the nomadic experience became critical for how and why I kept going, and allowing myself to release any guilt I felt about using that money, spending that money in the ways that I needed to support myself over the last couple of years, and embrace that. How do I know that the money that I've spent and used to support this lifestyle isn't going to come back to me tenfold, right? It's, again, maybe it's not a one for one ebb and flow, that who knows the ways that money might come back to me and recycle and kind of flow back in the ways that I haven't even discovered yet. So I'm sharing this from a place of wanting you to feel confident and trust in the resources that you've been given and the circumstances with which you find yourself, to be able to use and leverage those to support the types of decisions you want to make. Would I have been able to do this without the sale of my home and the profit of my home? I don't know. Maybe not. But that was the circumstances with which I had myself in. And because I am not married and I do not have children, I didn't feel responsible for anyone other than myself to be able to make some of these choices around how to use my money. And maybe that feels, again, like, wow, what a privilege. It is a privilege. And I claim the privilege with joy and gratitude and deep appreciation for how that worked in my favor. And I'm also releasing any type of judgment or opinion about how myself or anyone else decides and makes choices in their life about how to move forward, perhaps in a non-traditional way or in any way, to be candid. That I remember in last week's episode, I was talking a little bit about, like, it's not my business to know what other people think of me. And so the same goes for, it's not my business to really need to know how other people are doing the way they do their life. But I'm sharing this not to like reveal all the stories, but to give you that confidence and that like clarity around, we all have resources and support structures in our lives that enable us to do what we need and want to do. And I am somebody who has really had to leverage that and let go of any judgment associated with it. I don't know if people in my life look at me and feel like, gosh, how lucky is she? She gets to do all this stuff and she's got this money. And they may be thinking that. I don't know. But it's not a concern anymore. I have learned to really appreciate and sit in the truth of how this has unfolded. And like I said, been nothing short of grateful for how it's played out. And recognizing that in the trust of how this is all unfolding, I have been given an extremely fortunate circumstance to be able to help me do this life, to unfold my life in a way that I feel really called to explore and to deepen and to do differently. And so, yes, have I had the financial resources to do that? Of course. But I've also had to learn to have the resource of self-trust and intuition and in co-creation with the divine and supportive loved ones, utilizing all the resources, not just this one construct around money. And knowing that we all in some way have access. Again, in a perfect world, we all have access to be able to utilize and leverage some of these things. I just want to speak candidly about this is how I've been able to do it. And I'm very lucky. And I'm so grateful that you have given me this space to talk about it, because it's a little bit of that elephant in the room type of dynamic when it comes to people asking me about like what I've been doing and how I've been doing it. And I have really come to appreciate there's no shame in this game. This is how it worked for me. There are lots of people who do it differently, and other fortunate circumstances have worked in their favor to allow them to do what they need to do. So Partially, I share this to help you look at your own deck of cards, your hand, and say, where can I redefine something to recognize it supports me, it leverages me, it allows me to do what I need to do, and to lean into that with much more confidence and great, like gratitude versus if you felt this like I did at one point around shame, around embarrassment, or some sort of like, gosh, I don't want to tell anybody this is how I've been able to do this. Does it undermine the complex decisions I've had to make or the challenges I've faced? No. But it shows that I have been making choices for myself and using the resources that I've been given. So, friends, I hope this has been helpful. Again, thank you for tuning in, and as always, the supportive audience that you are and allowing me to tell these stories. And I look forward to being with you next time.